Have you ever wondered why there are so many COVID vaccines emerging in the world today? Are they all equally effective? What are the side effects? Are they equally safe? Hi, I'm Dr. Philip Lin, a medical doctor and also the host of the upcoming EDGETalk Live. On the 12th of March, EDGETalk will be featuring a guest speaker who is also a friend of mine. He's an infectious diseases expert and his name is Dr. Timothy William. He is also a member of the Malaysian COVID Vaccine Committee. Together, we'll be dialoguing and exploring the hot topic that's of concern to us and indeed to the world. COVID vaccines. How safe are they? It's a free online event and it may help you to decide. So see you at EDGETalk on the 12th of March, 8 to 9 p.m. Malaysian time. Check us out on Facebook and YouTube Live. That's KK EDGETalk. And I'll catch you soon.
Is it safe?
My question is for cancer survivors like me who had NPC. I have done chemotherapy as well as radiotherapy. So is the COVID vaccine safe for people like me?
So my big question is that why are there so many different types of vaccine and which one is safe, which one is not?
Hey, I'm Cooper from Melbourne, Australia. I'd really like to know what's in the COVID-19 vaccine, how it works, and how it's going to protect me and the people around me from COVID-19.
For me, I really want to know whether it's safe for my parents to take because of their pre-existing conditions. Is the vaccine safe for them?
Responsibility for your life. I'm Dr. Philip Lin of KK EDGETalk and you're listening to KK12 FM.
Dr. Khadijah.
EDGETalk is a series of deep and honest conversations with personalities from different spheres of the marketplace. Come and learn from the lives of these people who have walked the talk. Hear their stories, their passion, and even their struggles, and learn from their life principles and mottos and get inspired and empowered. Welcome to KK EDGETalk. Good evening to all our viewers, wherever you're joining us from, whichever part of the world. Great to have you with us this evening. This is our 8th edition of KK EDGETalk, which began 2.5 years ago in 2019. EDGETalk seeks to bring together public personalities and figures, as well as experts, to dialogue with us on issues that are of concern to all of us in everyday life. And this is what EDGETalk is about. It's about sharing life matters, because sharing life really matters. I'm Philip Lin, your host for this evening, and tonight we're exploring the subject of the COVID vaccines. Is it safe? Tonight we have with us our expert on the subject, an infectious diseases specialist and a friend of mine by the name of Dr. Timothy William. Dr. Tim William graduated from the University of Malaya and did his specialization in infectious diseases in Kuala Lumpur as well as in Australia. He's a member of the Malaysian COVID-19 Vaccine Working Group, as well as a co-author of the Malaysian Adult Vaccination Guidelines. So we're going to have a very, very interesting and exciting evening. And so you've joined us here on EDGETalk. Welcome once again to KK EDGETalk. And Dr. Timothy William, welcome to KK EDGETalk with us this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Philip, for inviting me for this talk. I'm very excited, and I think we're going to have an interesting evening as we share with one another on the COVID vaccines. And thanks for the kind introduction.
Well, we're all excited to hear from you because you're a man who has seen a lot of COVID cases firsthand here in KK. You work both in the private sector as well as in the government hospital looking after COVID-19 patients. Well, this has been an exciting month. We began this month with the rollout of the COVID vaccine, and we are now in the process of vaccinating our frontliners. Malaysia has made it clear that they want to vaccinate up to 70% of the population, and up to now, about 2 million people plus have registered to be vaccinated. Obviously, more need to be so, but it's early days yet. So while people are thinking about the vaccine, I'd like to just start with a few questions that are foremost on people's minds. So first, there's actually quite a lot of vaccines out there. And as for Malaysia, we know that Malaysia has ordered a certain number of vaccines. We have committed ourselves to a certain number of types of vaccines. We have committed ourselves to the Pfizer vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Chinese vaccines, which are the Sinovac vaccine and the CanSino Logistics Chinese vaccine, and then the Russian Sputnik vaccine. Can I just ask, why are there so many vaccines? Because people are confused.
Well, it's good that there are many vaccines. Many different countries have their own scientists and their own researchers, and this is a problem being faced by the population in all these countries. So countries have to take the initiative to create their own vaccines, and they can't be waiting for the other countries to be creating the vaccines.
So because of the great need in the countries, they have gone on ahead, because all these various vaccine technologies were already available. So they used whatever was at hand to create the vaccines. That's so much like an important thing because of the great need that's out there. But people will always be asking, Tim, are these vaccines equivalent? You know, I mean, is the Pfizer vaccine equivalent to the Sputnik vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine? What are your views on this?
Okay, state that. Every vaccine is good, all right? Every vaccine is good. But the question is, which vaccine is better? Everyone wants to know whether the Pfizer vaccine is better than the Moderna vaccine, which is better than the AstraZeneca. Well, we cannot really say until we have a side-by-side comparison between the vaccines and to compare the effectiveness with each other in a certain population. So I'm unable to answer that question, Philip, on which vaccine is better.
But the vaccines have published records. What we'd like to just find out from you, Tim, is that are those vaccines, they are not trialed vaccines, right? No, we're not using these vaccines as kind of guinea pigs, right? But they have been trialed and probably trialed before on a scientific basis, and then they've come up with the trial results, every one of those vaccines. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. So all the vaccines in Malaysia, they have already completed the phase 3 clinical trials, every single one of them, and they are being assessed by the vaccine committees in our country, and also the NPRA, which is the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency, not only in our country, but in every other country. For instance, just like the US FDA, each country has their own regulatory agencies which assess the data from all the vaccines. Now, when we say trial results, we mean by the phase 3 trial results. Phase 3
Exactly.
trial results are the large clinical trials, and all these vaccines have undergone phase 3 clinical trials.
And many of these results have published. Some are in the process of being published, but they have undergone those trials, which are important for us because we're not
Yes.
using unregulated or untrialed vaccines. That's the main point we need
Yes.
to get across to people. But when we say that a certain vaccine is so many percent effective, for example, the Pfizer vaccine is known to be 94% effective, and the AstraZeneca vaccine averages out to be about 70% effective. The Sputnik vaccine is 92% effective, and the Sinovac was ranged something between 50 to 90%, probably 85% effective. What do we mean by the word effective? I mean, can you explain in layman's terms what effectiveness of a vaccine means?
Okay, so I can understand why people be comparing the so-called effectiveness of the vaccines based on these numbers. So how do we get this number in a trial? So in a trial, you have two groups: the placebo group, the group that does not get the vaccine, and you have the group that gets the vaccine. And then they follow them up after a period of time, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and up to 2 months, and see the proportion of or the percentage of people among these two groups who develop COVID-19. So let's say they have an X number of COVID-19 patients. They will compare how many of the people who took the vaccine got COVID-19 versus the people who did not take the vaccine and who got COVID-19. And then when they compare these two percentages, and that's how they get the effectiveness of the vaccines.
So you mean that basically in 100 people on either side, when you have a 94% effectiveness, it means that 94 people on the one who took the vaccine did not get the COVID did not get COVID compared to the other side. Is that what you mean?
No, it's not. It's not actually. It's more like I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 1,000 people who has taken the vaccine, and another 1,000 people who did not take the vaccine, the placebo group, and you follow them up after 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and you get out of that 1,000, 100 people who develop COVID-19, right? 100 people who develop COVID-19 in both groups together, a total. Now, out of these 100 people who got COVID-19, 95 of these 100 people were from the placebo group, and roughly five of them were from the vaccine group. And that's how they compare the effectiveness, something like that. There's a more detailed calculation, but that's generally the idea.
And that is a very important distinction because it does mean that people who do get the vaccine can also catch COVID. That's what it means, but a much smaller percentage. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
So we know that can happen, but it seems that the people who do catch COVID, even after the vaccination, the COVID tends to be a lot less severe and much more milder and more moderate. And in fact, they usually don't get admitted to ICU. Would that be a general feeling that is true?
Yes, definitely. Among those in the vaccine groups, even those who got COVID-19, very, very few, a very tiny percentage got severe COVID, and almost none had died. So that is very, very encouraging because ultimately that's what we want the vaccine to do. Not only prevent a person from getting infected, but prevent the person from getting severe COVID and also dying of COVID.
Yes. And, can we just talk a little bit now about side effects? Because when we talk about safety, people immediately think about side effects of the vaccine. Let's split up side effects into both short-term and long-term, potentially longer-term side effects. Let's talk about the short-term side effects first of the COVID vaccine. What are the short-term side effects of the vaccine, Tim? Would you like to just put it in simple terms for our viewers so that they can understand, so that as and when they get a vaccine, they know what to expect?
Okay, I knew you were going to ask me this question, Philip, and I had trouble trying to memorize it. So to make things easier, I had the vaccine 2 days ago. So I'll tell you what happened. The most common side effect is pain at the injection site. I had mild pain, but some of my colleagues had more severe pain even after 1 day. So pain at the injection site. You also,
But I understand that the needle is actually a very small needle, right, Tim? It's a very fine needle, right?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. The injection itself may not be very painful, but after the
Yes.
injection, you will get the pain, and
Yes.
people get chills, generalized muscle aches, malaise, feeling very lazy and sleepy and tired. Some people may develop a mild rash, and some people may also get headaches as well. So this generally is a side effect, not limited to the COVID-19 vaccine alone, but the other vaccines as well.
And yeah, other vaccines will have this kind of reaction as well.
Yes.
And why would people get these kind of reactions? Has it got something to do with the response of the body in mounting immunity to the vaccine? Why do people get these common reactions?
Yes. When the body mounts an immune response to the vaccine, that's where you get all these signs and symptoms, and that's the reason for it. And well, there's a saying: if you don't feel pain and you don't have any other side effects, then some people worry that they didn't get the correct vaccine. So you get the vaccine, you don't get side effects. People say, the vaccine is not strong. You know how Asians are. You need to feel a bit of pain before you feel it.
Yeah, no gain without pain. That's what it says.
Yes.
But if you're one of those that actually, if anyone has been vaccinated here viewing and you're one of those that didn't get a reaction, it doesn't mean that the vaccine is not working, okay?
Yes.
It's just that only a certain percentage of people do get the reactions. And would it be right that, to prevent this reaction, some people actually just take a tablet of Panadol before they have an injection or shortly after the vaccination, and then the fever goes, the chill goes, and they feel much better?
Yeah, that's a good question, Philip. It's been advised that you try and avoid taking Panadol or any non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs before the vaccination. After the vaccination, you can take Panadol, paracetamol.
Okay. And that would have something to do with the fact that it might compromise the immune response?
Yes. A theoretical possibility, Philip.
Just a theoretical possibility. Okay.
Yes.
So just as a matter of interest, Dr. Tim, after you had the vaccination, were you able to work that day, or were you lying in bed and just drinking hot tea from your wife?
After the vaccine, I felt okay, but after a few hours, I felt a bit chilly and a bit of body aches, and I just rested. It wasn't so bad that I couldn't do anything. Tired. Yeah, that's how I felt.
Okay. What about some longer term side effects? Would there be any longer term side effects that that have been reported both in the press as well as the medical journals that they may not be that common, but perhaps some of the viewers watching them may have heard, watching us tonight, would have heard about this or read about this, and they just wondered whether you could address some of these side effects that either have been made more publicly aware for people or sensationalized. So is there anything that you think we should be concerned about, and would you like to raise them and talk about some of these longer term side effects or less common side effects, shall we say?
Yeah. So far in all the trials that have been published, at least, when you say long-term side effects, they mean about 60 days after the vaccines have been given, because the vaccines have only just been created. So you're unable to speculate what the 1 year or 2 year side effects would be. However, saying that said, if you do not get an adverse effect within 60 days, it's very, very unlikely for you to get an adverse effect after 60 days. So there have not been any long-term side effects at all that have been reported with these vaccines.
What about the effects that have been really come out in the press recently, which has actually created small headlines? For example, there has been thromboembolism in some people in Denmark and in Europe just recently.
Yes.
A couple of people suffered venous thrombosis as well as pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolism is a blockage of the arteries of the heart from clots. Were these related to the vaccines, and what's your view about them? Because I understand that countries like Denmark and Austria are still investigating them.
Yeah, and also Norway with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Well, whenever a vaccine is given in general, there's a vaccine adverse event reporting system. So when something like this happens, it's reported. The question is whether it's related to the vaccine or not. That's a more difficult question to answer because we are vaccinating millions of people every day, hundreds of thousands or even millions of people every day. And these events also occur when you're not vaccinating people. So they are still trying to investigate whether the vaccines are the ones that cause this thromboembolism. It's a continuous monitoring system.
So even if these were related, let's assume for a worst case scenario, there's no proof they're related, but assume that they were. But then the incidence of this, are you suggesting to us, is actually very, very small, and it is uncommon, it's rare. Are you suggesting that right now?
No, not really, Philip. In a sense, if these things actually happen, it needs to be investigated seriously. The vaccines are after the phase 3 trials. There's always post trial analysis where patients are being followed up. So every single adverse event, the public can be reassured is and should be investigated thoroughly to find whether it's a cause or not. And if the vaccine or even any drug for that matter, you find adverse effects resulting from the vaccine, then action should be taken. It's still too early to say.
It's too early to say, and that's what you're saying, that the jury is out at the moment and it needs to be investigated. Although at this point in time, probably about more than 200 million people have already been vaccinated or at least received their first jab. So yes, there are these possibilities. Just one thing about side effects, how common is anaphylaxis? Because anaphylaxis, which is an acute, instantaneous, kind of very short reaction involving the whole body that actually may lead to death, occurring immediately after the vaccine, how that's potentially lethal. How common is that?
Okay. So according to the data that has been collected in the US based on the vaccine adverse event reporting system for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, the incidence of anaphylaxis translates to roughly about 5 in 1 million vaccines. So for every 1 million vaccines, 5 people may get anaphylaxis, which is actually a very, very low number. And even if the people get an anaphylaxis, there's also treatment. And the people who do get anaphylaxis already have a history of anaphylaxis before. So there is ways to treat and manage this condition.
And having said that, it's not just peculiar to the COVID vaccine, because you can also get anaphylaxis from flu shots, for example, flu vaccinations, and so on. So it's not just peculiar to the COVID.
True. But for the other vaccines, the anaphylaxis rate is about 1 in a million. So there's a slightly higher reported anaphylaxis in the COVID-19, very slightly.
Yes. And different vaccines have slightly different anaphylaxis rates as well.
Yes.
That's the reason why after vaccination, people just hang around or ask to stay on for at least half an hour before they go. That's the reason why. Okay. Thank you for clarifying those areas of potential side effects and potential reactions to the vaccines. I think it's important for our viewers to know. I think the message out there is that it does happen. Precautions are taken during the vaccination, but also they are very uncommon right now, especially anaphylaxis. However, many people have questions as to whether they are suitable candidates for the vaccine. What is your view about those who are cancer survivors? Those who have come through their cancers, and those who are going through chemotherapy, going through their cancers. Are they candidates for the vaccination?
Yes, they are candidates for the vaccine. Cancer, those on chemotherapy, or any people who are immune suppressed, like people who have HIV or taking drugs that suppress the immune system, they are for the vaccine. Now, how does the vaccine affect them? Well, the first thing is, number one is all the societies advise them to take the vaccine, because COVID-19, if it infects them, has the risk, they have a higher risk of getting severe COVID-19.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. Now, the difference is that this group of people, they were not included in the trials. Okay, they were not included in the trials. So the doctor and the patient have to discuss about the risk and the benefit. Actually, there's not much risk. The risk is actually they may not actually mount an immune response that is as vigorous as those who have a normal immune system. So for these patients, for instance, for the Pfizer and the vaccines that require 2 doses, it's very important for them to get 2 doses of the vaccine. So the issue for these patients is not that the vaccine may be dangerous for them, but the vaccine may not be as effective for them as compared to people who are not immunosuppressed. So far, we are still looking at the data.
So the answer is yes, they are
The answer is
candidates
yes.
for the vaccine.
Yeah. And
But
they're not at
it'd
a
be good
higher
for them.
risk. Yeah, they're not at
It'd be
higher
good
risk.
for them to, absolutely. It'd be good for them to discuss it with oncologists so that at which point in their chemotherapy they should receive the vaccine, because then they would be able to max out their immune challenge to the vaccine.
Yes. Exactly.
What about old people, Tim? Older people. People are worried about whether their grannies and their granddads could actually have a vaccine. And what about pregnant and lactating women, breastfeeding women?
Okay, so COVID-19 affects older people much more by far than people at a younger age group, and many people who have died in the older age group. So elderly people should get the vaccine. Now, there is, for those who are very, very frail, elderly, very, very frail, then the doctor will have to assess them individually before giving the vaccine. But in general, every single old person elderly person should get the vaccine. In regards to people who are pregnant, again, there's limited data on pregnancy because people who are pregnant were not included in the trials. However, as I mentioned again, the vaccine adverse reaction reporting system in the US, about 30,000 who are pregnant have got the vaccine, and even more, and almost none of them have developed side effects as a result of the vaccine. So it's safe for pregnant women to receive the vaccines. Yes.
Yes. I think basically what you have said is that they're small data, they're good data, and so far the indications are good. And I think more trials and more data will be coming out on pregnant women and breastfeeding women. So we hang in there until further recommendations can be made in the coming days. Thank you. People have concerns about the vaccine, Tim, and one of the questions they ask is, you know what? Normal vaccines actually take years and years to develop. This has come out, virtually within 9 months. The first vaccine actually rolled out and got approved. Why has vaccine development been so short? I mean, people have doubts as to whether it's safe because it's so short in terms of its development. What's your answer to that?
Well, because the COVID-19 vaccine has been just the greatest pandemic that's ever affected us in our lifetime, and countries, especially in the US, have put enormous amount of resources into developing this vaccine. But other than resources, they have developed ways of combining the different phases of the trials together. So you have a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. They're all done concurrently. Phase 1, and while phase 1 trial is going on, the phase 2 takes place, and then the phase 3 goes on. So in that way, the vaccines have been able to come out as fast as possible. Yeah.
And many of them have actually received government funding as well in order to expedite the whole of the matter. Because control trials actually cost money. Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes to show if the world puts its resources on it, they can get things done. The other important reason is that millions of people have got COVID-19. So in order to develop a vaccine, you need a huge number of people to have the disease in order to get the vaccine. Unlike the previous diseases that have come up like SARS and MERS, COVID, you didn't have hundreds and thousands or millions of people getting it. So when you have millions of people having disease, it's easier to do it. It's easier to do the vaccine trials.
And also the technology for most of these vaccines were already freely available and well tested and established already. And they were using that technology. Just a personal question, Tim, because you have treated and seen many COVID patients, and you have recently been spending some time in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in the COVID wards as well, looking after sick COVID patients. Many people say, what's the big deal about COVID? It's just another kind of, a slightly kind of stronger version of the flu, isn't it? That's all that there is. So what's the big hoo-ha about? Why all this hoo-ha about vaccination? What's your response to that? Who's somebody who's actually seen the worst of COVID firsthand?
Actually, as a doctor who has treated many different infectious diseases, my view of COVID-19 changed a lot before I went to and actually saw COVID-19 patients and after I had seen COVID-19 patients. This is not the flu, my friends, and all that out in the audience. This is not the flu. COVID-19 is a deadly disease, and very often it affects millions of people, and a significant portion of people actually die. If you look at the data now, there are about 2 million people in the world who have already died of COVID or a new disease. If you just look at HIV alone in the United States, for the past, from the year 1981 till 2018, 800,000 people have died of AIDS, as compared to already 500,000 United States citizens in 1 year have died because of COVID. And we are talking about people in the developed countries who are getting very sick and dying of this disease. Philip, I tell you, after seeing patients and treating patients, I fear for this disease. Yeah, I really fear this disease. Yeah.
So, guys, the message out there is that if the expert and specialist in infectious diseases who has seen more COVID than most of us, all of us probably, and he has raised the level of concerns and fear from what he has seen, then you know that we're not dealing with something ordinary. Most of us doctors, we have seen a lot of things, and so for Dr. Tim William to say that this is not the flu, not that what people make it out to be, it's something much, much more severe. I think we need to take it much more seriously. Thank you, Tim, for giving us perspective on that. And that's why we need to fight very hard against this disease. For you viewers who are out there, can I just say that you're very welcome to ask questions while you have this opportunity. Just ask questions in the chat box. We'll curate some of these questions, and if there are really questions that can be answered and fielded, I will ask them on your behalf of Dr. Tim. There are a few questions that have come in, so just keep them rolling in. I don't promise to answer all the questions. I don't promise to ask all the questions on your behalf because there may not be enough time, but just keep them rolling in and you may get your questions being asked. This is one of the questions that's come in. COVID-19 mortality rate has declined globally. So why do we need still to be vaccinated? Dr. Tim, can you just quickly answer that?
Well, when it comes to deaths, it's the numbers that count. All right. For instance, in Malaysia alone, more than 1,000 people have died of COVID-19. In the United States, more than 500,000 people have died. In the whole world, more than 2 million people have died because of COVID. So when it comes to deaths, rates don't matter much if the percentage of people die, even though it's small, but the number of people getting the disease is very, very high. So just because a person gets COVID, if you get COVID, the chance of a person dying is, you may say is low, but each individual patient is different. What's different about this disease is that for those people who get severe COVID, there's a subset of patients that no matter what we do, what the doctors do, they still end up dying despite being treated in the best centers. So let us not take our eye off the problem just because we say the mortality rate is low. For everyone who gets COVID, it doesn't work that way. A person who's over 70 and over 80 who gets COVID-19 has a higher risk of dying. You do not know whether you will be one of that small percentage of people who actually die. And what about people who do not die and who develop morbidities as a result of COVID? They get thromboembolism, they get increased risk of myocardial infarctions, strokes, and also there's a phenomenon known as long COVID syndrome that affects that we are only beginning to realize that's happening in many people, Philip.
Yeah. So in other words, COVID is no fun.
Really.
Many people can get a mild form of the disease, especially younger people, but actually COVID can do really, really nasty things. It's like the mafia. It's like the bad boy. You can get a mild, fever, nothing very much more. But when it starts ravaging the body, it can really, really ravage the body. It can continue for years or probably months, and possibly years after, and ravaging the body. So it's not much fun. Is that right, Dr. Tim? Yeah.
Yes, Philip. Yes. You see, many people may say, the risk of dying, risk of mortality, but just try talking to the people who have lost loved ones. Talk to the people who have got COVID and then you realize the enormity of the problem, the seriousness of the problem.
So when you take a best case scenario, a good case scenario like Malaysia, Malaysia's not doing too bad. We probably have about 0.4% or 0.4% of death. In some of the worst countries in the world, it's 4% of death. So let's average it out. Let's say 2% of people die. If you have 100 million people and 2% of people die, 2% you may think is not a lot, but it's 2 million people. That's
Yes,
a
exactly.
huge number. That's a huge number. And that could include our loved ones, our relatives, our parents, and our friends. And so it becomes a very, very challenging thing. So it's not something to be sneezed at. Coming back to the vaccine here, let me just ask a few more questions in a short while. But let me just get back to a couple of questions I want to ask here. People say the vaccine is effective in preventing COVID up to that certain percentage, whatever, 95%, 94%, or 90%, and so on. But a big question now is, does the vaccine stop the transmission of the virus? Okay. In other words, when you get vaccinated, we got a 95% chance that we won't get the illness. But does it stop us transmitting the virus? What's your view on that?
Yes, actually, the studies have shown, especially in Israel, that the chance of asymptomatic, and these results are just released today, it reduces the risk of asymptomatic infection by more than 95%. This from the studies that are done in Israel. So when you reduce the risk of asymptomatic infection by 95%, we know that most of the infections spread transmissions is caused by the pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic period. It will translate into reduction in the transmission.
This is really good news because Israel is leading the world in terms of its vaccination program right now. If I understand correctly, just under 60% of the people have been vaccinated or at least have received their first dose. And they are leading the world in terms of the vaccination rates. So for this to come out, it clearly means that there is a possibility, it needs to be confirmed. But what do you think? Is there a possibility that if we can really curb transmission like that, there's SOPs, the lifting of lockdowns and restrictions will be something that we can look forward to in the near future?
Well, that still remains to be seen, Philip. Looking at the COVID-19 from 2020, you will realize a lot of the predictions have not come true. So the one thing we learned about COVID-19 is never to underestimate this disease. As you all know, there are already variants that have already appeared all around the world. Variants in Brazil, in South Africa, in the UK, and the United States. And we do not know the effect of the variants and how it affects the vaccine and the future of this disease. So,
carry on.
So,
we'll come back and talk about variants in a short while. I'm talking about variants in a short while, okay?
Yeah.
So, yes.
So the question,
yes.
I think many people are asking, when is this going to end? When our SOPs are going to end? Well, SOPs is just a general term. There are different levels of standard operating procedures depending on the level of infection in a certain community. So we still have to try our best to prevent ourselves from getting infected and try our best from getting others infected. That's a general principle behind the standard operating procedures.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, if you're thinking the SOPs will be lifted soon and everything is back to business as normal, you just sort of got to hold your horses. We need more studies to be sure, and we're not quite sure whether the variants is throwing a spanner in the works at the moment. So this COVID vaccine virus, he's a gangster. It's a bad boy, and sometimes we are second guessing what it will do next. So we need to keep a very close eye on things at the moment. Now, just coming back to the Malaysian vaccination program, as it continues, more and more people are vaccinated. After the frontliners have been vaccinated, then the older people are vaccinated, and so on. We go down to various age groups. Do people have a choice about what vaccines they want? I mean, it's like, can you go into a shop and choose what kind of brand you want, for your clothes or your handbags or whatever?
At the moment, Philip, I think there's no choice. We just have to get the vaccine at the moment because of the shortage of vaccines, the limited supply of vaccines around the world. The all vaccines are effective to a certain extent, so I will take whatever vaccine that comes. So,
Okay.
answer your question is we may not have a choice on at the moment on what
Okay,
vaccine.
so basically, the best vaccine for anyone to take is the vaccine that's available to you.
Yes,
That would be the
yes,
answer. And there may be variable degrees of effectiveness for each vaccine, but they are comparable. And one of the common thing amongst the vaccines is that whatever vaccine you take, it will be effective up to that level. But the more important, it will prevent you from getting severe COVID, which is the one that kills.
yes, exactly.
And that's why
Exactly.
that's why we it doesn't matter if we don't get a choice. The correct vaccine is the one that's available to you. Okay. Dr. Tim, there is let me just ask you again. In Sabah, we have a rather poor infrastructure, So, you have been one of the authors of adult vaccination guidelines in Malaysia, and you're part of the COVID-19 working group for vaccines in COVID-19 vaccine in Malaysia. We have poor infrastructure in Sabah. How do we know, somebody's asking now, if the vaccines are kept at the recommended conditions throughout the journey? For example, the Pfizer vaccines needs a minus 70 degrees Celsius storage and cold chain transmission. AstraZeneca, 2 to 8 degrees. How do we know that getting the vaccine to deteriorate, we are able to preserve this cold chain transmission without it being broken?
Okay. Let's look back at our childhood vaccinations in Sabah. Now, despite the challenges faced by the public health people, authorities, we have actually been very, very successful in vaccinating our children before this. Now, in terms of maintaining the cold chain, it has been done before. It has been done before in Sabah, and even in the most rural of areas, children have been vaccinated. So our public health doctors and nurses, they are very, very experienced in Sabah in being able to conduct vaccination programs of at this level. So to be honest, as someone who's worked here for a long time, I'm very, very confident in their ability to do this.
But having said that, Dr. Sim, we have never had to deal with temperatures like minus 70 Celsius before, right?
Yes, but we have a minus 70 degree refrigerators in hospitals before this. And you must realize that the vaccine doesn't need to be in minus 70 degrees Celsius constantly. I think if they're out for a few days, the temperature that's needed is lower than that. And you also have other devices like liquid nitrogen and carbon dioxide that can maintain these vaccines at very, very low temperatures.
Yeah, I think that's important.
I don't think it's a challenge. It is a challenge that's not insurmountable in Sabah.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah.
I'm glad you have that confidence, and
Yeah.
that's very reassuring to hear that from you, because we have mounted successful vaccinations campaigns right across Sabah, and we are, that has been the way we have managed to control our childhood diseases like measles, rubella, mumps, and so on, and diphtheria, and so on, and that has been proven right through in our vaccination history in Sabah. So so just that gives us a little bit of confidence booster. So in a sense, many of the vaccines, they require 2 to 8 degrees storage and cold chain transmission. We have already done that for years and years and years.
Yes.
Especially.
Yes.
Let me address one or two other things before I talk about variants and mutations. Okay, there's been quite a bit of news about the mRNA vaccine, and we know that the two mRNA vaccines at the moment that is being used are the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine right now. Now, there's a lot of news, largely fake, circulating that the mRNA vaccine will allow the viral RNA to be incorporated into our own genetic system after the vaccination. In other words, this viral RNA from the virus gets incorporated into our genes, implanted into our genes, and then we keep making spike proteins for life from our cells. Is this true or is it false? What's your view on this news that's circulating? Many people don't like an idea of something foreign like a viral gene or RNA, genetic material, getting incorporated into our DNA. Does that happen?
That does not happen, Philip. That does not happen. The mRNA vaccine technology has been used for cancer patients for many years, even before this. The mRNA does not enter the nucleus. The mRNA does not integrate itself into the nucleus DNA. In order for it to do that, in order for the mRNA to enter and be integrated, you need many enzymes that are not available in the virus itself. So even if you get a COVID-19, even if a person gets a COVID-19 infection, it doesn't stay in the cell forever. The cell dies. But the mRNA vaccine only encodes the crown protein or the S protein of the COVID, one part of the COVID virus. So number one, it does not create an entire virus. Number two, it doesn't enter the genome. Number three, it doesn't integrate itself with the cell DNA. So those are the facts. I mean, you're not just trying to say it so that it's more acceptable. That's just a fact.
So after producing the spike proteins from the viral mRNA in the cell, eventually that mRNA is destroyed and the cell dies.
Yes, destroyed very fast. Yeah, very fast.
Okay.
Very fast. So they don't stay there forever.
I hope that people out there, you are assured by this. This is the expert opinion. There is no genetic manipulation into our genetic system per se, and that virus genetic material, the RNA, does not get incorporated in our cells. Please do not believe these fake news that there is that genetic incorporation into our cells. There is another bit of fake news floating around, or news that causes people of concerns, because that it's been said that the mRNA vaccine or the COVID vaccines might render women infertile because the spike proteins share some of the protein segment similar to that of the human placenta protein cells. Does it cause infertility?
Well, we can only speak with the evidence that's given. So far, there's been no evidence at all whatsoever that it can cause infertility. So that's just what the data says. I'm just saying what the data says. Yeah.
So we go on data rather than on speculation. Just because the protein actually is similar in one small segment doesn't mean that the antibodies will react against a human placenta cell. I'm sure that's true. It's like if you have similar numbers, we have an 8-number telephone number, and we share 3 similar numbers, we're not going to be able to communicate with each other, in the same way. Interestingly, Tim, I don't know whether you noticed that the Pfizer trials that was done in the placebo arm and in the Pfizer vaccine arm, 11 people in the placebo, 10 people in the placebo arm fell pregnant during the phase 2 trials. And 11 in the vaccine arm fell pregnant. So 10 in one arm and 11 in the other arm. So it just goes to show that there's no difference in fertility, at least for that anecdotal trial data that we saw. That's interesting. That's out of 40,000 people. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important, Philip, for people to realize that scientists actually go by the data. We're not trying to sell the vaccine. We're not trying to promote the vaccine when it comes to the fear or the effectiveness or the adverse effect. We just go by the data.
There's somebody who just asked a very interesting question, and I think, we need to give the women a little bit of voice in this. There's a woman that says, I'm pregnant now, and so assuming that, the vaccine will be allowed for pregnant women in the near future, and I receive the vaccine, will my baby be born with COVID antibodies? That means the baby has got natural maternal immunity for the first 6 months.
Well, the baby, antibodies, as you know, will transfer. IgG antibodies will transfer from the mother to the baby.
Yes.
I think the question is whether the baby will be immune to COVID-19. I don't know the answer to that. But we do know that maternal antibodies in babies do offer certain level of protection to most diseases.
Let's talk now about the variants that are emerging right across the world, because that is the item of great concern for our future. Because we have the variants that's emerging, and Tip, can you just give us the 3 or 4 big variants that are that's emerging right now across the world? Can you just tell us what those variants are?
So we have the UK B117 variant. I can't get the alphabets and the numbers correct. And you have the P1 variant in Brazil, and you also have the South African variant. And I can't offhand remember the alphabet and all that. And you have numerous other variants in the US that have been detected. And it's not surprising, because the vaccines, the virus mutates, and there will be variants. But these are the 3 main variants that we are concerned about. The Pfizer BioNTech variant.
So let's talk about the efficacy of the vaccines for the variants, because when all the trials were done, the phase 3 trials for the major vaccines that we are using today, most of them were done before the emergence of the variants, only at least before significant emergence of the variants. And now we have the variants emerging. It's like, we're kind of blindsided by these variants coming in. Can you tell us how effective the various vaccines are for the various variants? It's getting more complicated now because more vaccines are coming in and more variants are coming in. But from what we know, can you just summarize the data for us?
So we do know that about 70% of the people in Israel had the B117 or the UK variant, and they responded to the vaccine. They did not get COVID-19. So we do know that. And there are some studies, early studies that have come up, which shows that at least the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is effective, at least on a lab level, against the South African and the Brazil and the UK variant. Now, whether this will last long, whether the other variants will come up and be able to resist the vaccines remains to be seen. Having said that, the vaccine mutates, and it's always a battle between us and the virus in trying to overcome it. So there has been evidence that, real evidence that at least the Pfizer vaccines are effective against certain variants.
Yes. It is found, I think recently, that a small trial done in South Africa, that the AstraZeneca vaccine was not as effective against mild and moderate South African variants. Was that true? That was about a month ago.
Yes.
But it may be not effective against a mild and moderate COVID in South Africa, in the South African variants, but we're not quite sure. Yeah. The chances are it still probably protects against the severe form.
Yeah.
So
Philip, you see, you have different vaccines. You have different vaccines, and you have different variants. So they're not homogeneous, and we do not know which vaccines will be effective against which variants, and as the virus mutates. So you may come a time to find that certain vaccines are more effective against certain variants. Having said that, and I don't like to predict things, it is very much possible. In fact, the Pfizer has already been doing studies to deal with these new variants. Studies, I mean, possibly new modifications of the vaccines coming out maybe next year to deal with the variants as they come, as we face them.
Yes. These are very challenging times because obviously, these variants will become stronger and stronger in featuring across global populations increasingly, because they are the ones who are less susceptible to the present vaccination programs that's been rolled out globally. And so we will see a lot more of them in terms of challenging. As you said, some vaccines are more effective than others. And, of course, there'll be more variants coming out and also more vaccines coming out. Do you think there can be a case made? And I know that trials are being done right now. I don't know whether you have any data on them. Do you think there could be case made for, starting somebody on an AstraZeneca vaccine and a second dose of a Pfizer vaccine or a mixture of vaccines? I gather that some trials are being done right now to mix the vaccines.
Well, I mean, it's still very new technology for all the vaccines before we start mixing them up. There are a lot of questions on, the duration between the interval between the first dose and the second dose, whether it can be extended from 21 days to 28 days to 1 month and 2 months, and whether the vaccine should be given in combination or whether the vaccine can be given one another. So these are all questions that perhaps it would be answered in further trials. So I can't really speculate, Philip,
Yes.
on whether a cocktail of vaccines would be better than a single vaccine.
Yes, yes. But we
Yes.
can just think about them, because I think these are the things that will probably be coming out in the near future. Viewers, I hope you understand that we Dr. Tim and myself, we are not into speculation. We give you the data as it is, especially Dr. Tim, who is the expert in this whole area of the COVID illness and the COVID vaccines. And so we are not talking about speculating specs, but we are just giving you kind of a heads up as to what's coming. And what people are thinking about in the coming days, possibly even about mixing vaccines. But is it recommended now that we mix vaccines? Answer is no. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Will it be more effective potentially in the future? Possibly, but we need for data to come out. And therefore,
Yes.
can governments recommend that mixing of vaccines? The answer is no, because there's no data, not enough data on it right now. Okay, but the variants will be one of our bigger challenges in the coming days.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
sure of that.
There'll be more
yes.
and more variants. Yeah.
There'll be
Just
more
on-
and more variants. Yeah,
Yeah.
carry on.
No, in Brazil, for instance, in the city of Manaus, they had a huge outbreak earlier, and they thought that many people, after getting COVID, will not get it again. But then there's another huge outbreak, another spike in the cases in Brazil because of the new P1 variant. So these new variants, they appear. We can't predict where they'll appear, and we can't predict the effectiveness, the infectivity, and how virulent these viruses are. So what we can be sure is there'll be new variants that are coming out as we have new vaccines. The virus will mutate in order to evade the vaccines and our own immune system. So it's going to be a constant battle between us and COVID-19.
Yes, this is something very, very interesting. One of the things that people often ask is, if I take the vaccination and I get the vaccination, how long will this immunity last? Can you tackle this? I know it's early days, but can you give us a hunch as to how long this immunity is likely to last? Because people say, well, you know what? If you give me a vaccination and I don't know how long it's going to last, how do I know that maybe next 4 or 5 months I'm going to need another vaccination again and redo the whole thing? What's your thinking on this, Tim? At the same time, can you just also give us an idea as to how long natural antibodies last after a person has had COVID illness? How long will the antibodies last for?
Okay, so how long would the vaccine be effective also still remains a question that we still haven't answered yet. We do know it'll last for about 2 to 3 months. We hope it'll last for more than 1 year. But as the new variants come out, it adds a certain level of uncertainty towards it. So based on what we do know, we hope that it'll last for about a year. Sorry, Philip, you were breaking up the next question you wanted to ask.
Okay, my other question was, how long do the antibodies last in somebody who's had a natural COVID infection?
Right. Well, the antibodies, depending on which study you are seeing, the antibodies can last from detectable from a few weeks to a few months. But the antibodies are not a defense mechanism against the COVID, meaning to say the antibodies that result from the infection, there are also memory T cells and memory B cells. So when the antibody levels have come down and a person gets another COVID infection, or a person is vaccinated and gets another COVID infection, these T cells and the B cells, they retain a memory that can produce new antibodies, and the T cells can also act to prevent the virus from multiplying in the body.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just in case you missed what Dr. Tim was saying, he says that antibodies are not the only indicator that a person is immune. So
Yes.
after a vaccination, you get antibodies produced, but the antibodies then decay and fade over a period of time. Just because you cannot detect antibodies in somebody after 6 months does not necessarily mean they are not immune, because the
Yes.
body may have memories stored in these particular cells called T cells and B cells. They have a memory, okay? Now, Dr. Tim, just briefly tell us, what do the B cells do and what do the T cells do, okay? So that they have a memory. They carry the memory of immunity against the COVID virus. So when a new COVID virus comes and these two cells in the body have memory, the B cell and the T cell, what do they do in response to the COVID virus?
Okay, so what the B cells do is the B cells are involved in the production of antibodies, and the antibodies then attack the virus and prevents the virus from attaching itself to the receptors in the human cell, specifically the ACE2 receptors. What do the T cells do? Now, the T cells, once they are activated, they actually prevent the virus after infecting the cell. They actually destroy the cell that contains the virus, and hence prevents the virus from multiplying in the cell. So the T cells kill the infected cells. So they work in this two-pronged manner in stopping the infection from spreading in the body and outside. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. In simple pictorial term, guys, what happens is that the antibody neutralizes the virus, okay? It sticks to the virus, neutralizes it. And the T cells, that's from the B cells, and the T cells, they eat up the virus. Basically, they kill the virus and eat it up. Yeah. So these are the two mechanisms by which the body retains memory, okay? So we're still learning about all this. We think the immunity, I personally, Tim, I feel that the immunity will last longer. I think they will last longer than 6 months. Based on our experience of vaccines, from flu and all kinds of vaccines, I believe that the immunity will last longer than 6 months or even a year.
Yes.
But obviously, no data. We got to wait for the data to prove that. Yeah. Yeah. What's your hunch? I just thought you'd like to get a hunch.
I think you will be immune to developing a moderate to severe COVID. Even after 1 year, a person may get infected, but the risk of them getting severe COVID will be much less. We only just started using the vaccine in December. It's only March. So what we can say is, for those people who have not got the vaccine, the infection from December to March, we can say that it lasted for 4 months. So only time will be able to prove. But I'm thinking maybe about 1 year, hopefully.
Okay, great. There's one other question from somebody who asked, what about my brother or my sibling who has got, who's either physically or mentally challenged, and has disabilities, OKUs. Would they be also candidates for the vaccine? Would they be okay to be vaccinated as well, Tim?
Yes, they will be candidates for the vaccine, and they should be vaccinated as well, especially if they have an underlying condition that puts them at a higher risk of getting severe COVID.
Can we just go away from the vaccine for a short while as we come towards the end of our talk this evening? Because this evening has been largely about vaccine. So if I can divert just for a bit, and ask, do you think vaccines is the only answer to COVID? What about, things that we can do to increase our immunity to prevent us from getting COVID? There's been lots of talks about things like vitamin D and zinc and vitamin C, which we can use to supplement our bodies and prevent us from getting COVID. What do you think of that, Dr. Tim, and what do you think about the data that's available so far as to make this as kind of assessment?
So far, first of all, I don't think there's any harm in taking vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. But to be honest, we really don't have the data to indicate that by taking it, reduces your risk of getting COVID or severe COVID. I wish it did, but it doesn't.
What about, okay, so I think some of these studies have come out as a result, people saying, well, some of the patients who had severe COVID came into ICU, especially in places like Spain and other European countries, and they had low levels of vitamin D. And could it be that people with low levels of vitamin D got more severe COVID? And so that is where it arose, the speculation arose that maybe if we replace people's vitamin D and supplement it, we could actually prevent COVID. But as you rightly said, there is not enough large-scale trials to show that this is effective right now, but it doesn't do any harm. Okay, so it's not an advocate. You're not advocating it, but you're like, yeah, if you want to take it, you can take it. Yeah, it won't do any harm.
Yes.
Yeah. What about drugs? Okay, there's been 2 drugs that has kind of hit the headlines in prevention of COVID, and some quarters have talked a lot about it, and especially in the early days, even President Trump used to talk a lot about it. Hydroxychloroquine and another lesser well-known drug called ivermectin. Some quarters have said hydroxychloroquine actually prevents, and ivermectin also prevents COVID. And these are very cheap drugs, have been used for a long, long time. And we know their side effects are not that great. In fact, some of them are very safe drugs. So why aren't we using them?
Okay, for hydroxychloroquine, I mean, it was hoped in the initial stages of COVID. I think many people hoped that hydroxychloroquine would work. And, many doctors hope as well, including myself. But the fact of the matter is numerous trials have been done, randomized controlled trials, and have actually shown that hydroxychloroquine has no effect on COVID-19, in the treatment of COVID-19. There's no positive effect. As for ivermectin, there have been studies that randomized controlled trials, small randomized controlled trials that show that it's effective. There are also studies that show that it's not, there are a few studies that show that it's actually worse by giving it. So the jury is still out on ivermectin, but definitely hydroxychloroquine. Many studies. The world did not reject the use of hydroxychloroquine because of President Trump, but scientists did actually did their studies on hydroxychloroquine and found that it was not effective. So
carry on, Tim. Yes.
No. So there's a difference between hoping that something would work and the evidence that it works. So scientists and people, in general, we have fears, we have hopes. Our fears shouldn't be unfounded, and our hopes shouldn't be wishful thinking either.
Yeah. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, we are talking about evidence-based medicine here. And so you have heard from Dr. Tim that whatever he knows and whatever has been proven or shown from medical studies, from randomized controlled trials, that we can clear, there's good science backing it, then that can be clearly recommended. Whatever is still out in terms of hung jury at the moment, we don't really know. We await further trial results. And whatever has been shown not to be effective, I think he has said, he has also made that very clear. I hope that has been useful in clarifying many things tonight, because there's been a lot of news of all sorts of configurations out there. And for many of us, it must be very, very hard to navigate this, especially when we don't have a medical background. And many of these news are often forwarded to us by well-meaning, trusted friends of ours who mean well, but who are equally ignorant, just like us, like some of us. And then we just forward it on. So it's good tonight to be addressing some of these questions. As I close, Tim, thank you for being with us. I just want to ask a couple of final questions here. Can you just very quickly reiterate for one more of our listener as to why immunocompromised cancer surviving patients or people who have physical and challenges and disability, why they should be taking the vaccine? Why is it? Just give us a quick answer to that.
Please, they must take the vaccine. They should take the vaccine. The risk of them getting severe COVID-19 even that is very, very much more higher compared to people who are not immunocompromised or do not have a comorbidity. So if anyone you know or person is in that category, they should get the vaccine. In fact, they should be prioritized to get the vaccine. For those who are immunocompromised or receiving chemotherapy, doctors may discuss with the patient on when to get the vaccine, not because of the side effects that the patient may have, but in order to the vaccine to be most effective. So that would be a message to you. Please take the vaccine if you are in
Thank
a
you.
group that is highly in the at-risk group of getting severe COVID.
Yes, and basically the message to that is if you have these conditions, it's somehow linked
Yes.
to a lower level of immunity and immune defense system, whether you are physically disabled or, and born with some congenital conditions, or whether you're old or you have be a cancer survivor, your relative immunity is much lower. And that's the reason why that's what Dr. Tim has been trying to say. Now, frontliners are now receiving the vaccine in Malaysia. Have you heard of anything untoward right now, Dr. Tim? Up to now, we have been at it for the last 2.5, 3 weeks. Frontliners being vaccinated. Anything untoward, bad news,
So
or
far,
shocking news?
so far I haven't had anything untoward. And Malaysian style, if there was something untoward, it would have been WhatsApp and viral. And so far, nothing has been reported, and no one has, at least the people I know, have reported any severe side effects.
And our politicians also look as strong as ever right now and as active as ever. Many of them have been the first to receive the vaccine as well. So
Yes, yes,
they
yes,
haven't kind of
yes,
disappeared from the scene. So we know that nothing untoward has happened. Okay.
yes.
How long do you think, as I close, how long do you think we will take to achieve herd immunity in our country? The government's aim is February 2020 to get to the 70%. Do you think that's
Well, I
ambitious?
think,
Do you think it's achievable?
yeah, I mean, you need about 70 to 90% of people in the population to be vaccinated or immunized to achieve a meaningful herd immunity. So, looking at the rate of vaccination in our country, you can do the calculation yourself. It doesn't look as of this moment that we're going to achieve those the needed percentages by that time, Philip. The government may have plans to ramp up the immunization. I'm not sure about it, but I think they may have plans. If they do, then it's good.
Well, we'll do our best, and we hope for the best. But right now, it looks as though at the present rate of vaccination, guys, it looks as though our cross borders may not be necessarily that easily open. Even interstate borders, will be challenged from time to time in its openings because the vaccination rate is not half as anything as what we had hoped for up to now. But hey, if you had a final message to all our viewers tonight, and this is our very last question now, what would your message be, Dr. Tim? What would your message be to all our viewers out there who have been listening to us this past hour?
Okay. COVID-19 is the most devastating disease to infect all of us in the world, including those in Malaysia. We can overcome this disease. The vaccine is very, very promising. In fact, it's going to help us end this pandemic. But vaccines alone are not enough. But please do get the vaccinations. Get the vaccinations, but vaccines alone are not enough. We still have to keep the standard operating procedures, wear a mask, avoid crowded areas, and try and social or do physical distancing as much as possible until we get this disease under control. We're still battling COVID-19, and we can do it together. That's my final message to all of y'all, my friends.
Thank you, Tim. And that's Dr. Timothy Williams, infectious diseases specialist and expert in Malaysia. And we are so glad that you've been able to join us this evening and give us your views, Tim. It's been a pleasure and a joy just having you here. And thank you for your contribution to our understanding of the COVID vaccine tonight.
Thank you very much, Philip, and God bless you.
And thank you once again. So right now, as we close this time together, I just want to say that the message that has gone out is clear, and I hope that it's answered most of your questions here tonight with regards to the COVID vaccine. Is it safe? This is by somebody, Dr. Tim Williams, who has put his arm, as it were, to the needle. So he has had his vaccination shot as a frontliner. And soon the vaccine rollout will reach you as well. And I hope that this will help you not just to make decisions for yourselves, but also for your loved ones and your friends. It remains for me to thank you for joining us tonight and viewing, and I trust that we will meet again in the near future, because that's what EDGETalk is about. It's about sharing life matters, because sharing life really matters. And I hope tonight you have been enlightened with regards to the rollout of the COVID vaccination program in Malaysia and the vaccine itself regarding its safety. Well, stay in touch with us, stay in tune, and keep your ears peeled and your eyes looking on KK EDGETalk, because we will have future EDGETalks coming up, and we hope to bring you something that will help you again in encountering and engaging you on some of the important issues of life, because sharing life really matters. So it's good night from me now. Thank you for viewing, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now. Life is as good as you make it to be. So stay positive and take responsibility for your life. I'm Dr. Philip Lin of KK EDGETalk, and you're listening to KK12 FM.
Doktor Khadijah.